Nice to see everyone and be with the students again. And so this is the August Jyotish Journey webinar. It's associated on the two-part article, Graha Bala, which was about the quantitative measures that we find within Jyotish for calculating Graha Bala. And, it comes back to the question, why is Graha Bala so important? For a lot of different reasons, but the way I'm really emphasizing it here is, when we go to qualify yogas and we want to get some sort of assessment of the magnitude of the result, good, bad, or otherwise, of the yoga, then that's mostly a function of planetary strength. And then the quality of the yoga also is influenced, of course, by whether it has blemishes or not, or whether it's a pure yoga, but this idea of strength. But then at the same time, you've all heard me say, and I'll emphasize it again, that strength is not the same thing as influence. What I mean by that, for a long time, and students are always confused about this, and I was confused about it myself for a long time, So just because you have a planet that's very strong doesn't mean that its results are always going to be favorable results, all right? That has to do with other factors. But of course, if you have a planet that's involved in favorable yogas that can give career rise, yogas that can give wealth, other favorable sort of yogas, and then the planets are strong and you run the periods of those planets and there's not a lot of affliction to it. Otherwise, well, this is when you see the most good and dramatic results. But I've also seen over and over again, I've attempted to illustrate this, that, the fruit of the yoga, it just really depends a lot on the strength of the planets involved, and the fact that you can have the structure of a yoga in the chart. You can have a combination that under different conditions might be able to give wealth, but really doesn't in a chart because the planets involved don't have any juice. They don't have any rasa. Right? So this is where the ability to look at the issue of strength from a number of different standpoints becomes a useful thing to do. At the same time, I think you've probably seen that I've emphasized in the article that these quantitative measures of strength in Jyotish, you can't rely on them completely either. And that if you do, you could go wrong. And that there's some issues, not issues, but there are some things in regards to strength that these measures don't really account for, such as exchanges. And you've all seen many examples of how strong a planet becomes as a result of an exchange. And even the sort of condition of Vargotama, unless it's Vargotama own sign or Vargotama exalted, really wouldn't get taken into account here in the Vimshapaka Bala either. So, it'd be nice if there's something in Jyotish, we could just look at some table, we could look at some figure, and that's some sort of definitive, final determination of how strongly that planet is. But you'll look for that in vain, in my experience. And that you're always having to consider, and it's always a synthesis of other factors. So with that lead in, I'm going to pull up this chart. And it should be a chart that many of you might recognize because, you've probably seen it on more than one occasion in my articles or even in a webinar. And just maybe, Ekaterina, could you confirm that you're seeing the chart very clearly? It's Leo Lagna 920. It's showing up fine, yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I want everyone just to sort of zero in on this chart and contemplate it in terms of yogas, number one, and then strength of planets, number two, just on what I call inspection. Inspection means you're just looking at the Rashi, and maybe you have the ability to see degrees of planets and place them in Navamsha. So just based on this, what strikes you, if anything?
There's an extremely strong Shasha Yoga with Saturn in the 7th.
All right, so there's an extremely strong Sasha Yoga, and what makes this the real deal in terms of a Mahapurush Yoga?
It repeats from the moon, it repeats from the sun. Saturn is in its own sign, and it has Digbala. It's in its own sign in the Navamsha.
Okay.
It aspects to Lagna and the Lagna Lord.
Right. So just by inspection, what I call inspection, which is basically Rashi Navamsha, you see that you have one very powerful Saturn here, right? It's got, good own sign, Mula Trikona sign placements, both in Rashi and Navamsha, and then it also gets this directional strength that repeats from all three lagnas, you've got a very, very powerful Sasha Yoga. Okay. Very, very notable and distinctive feature of the chart, maybe the most distinctive feature of the chart. What else? Anyone?
You also have Mars very strong. It's exalted. It is in the sixth house, but it's exalted. It's also Vargotama.
You've got an exalted Vargotama Yogakaraka Mars. So, you know, again, just by inspection, we don't have to consult any Vimshapaka. We don't need to consult any Shadbala. We can see that these two grahas have, at least, you know, on that surface, have this really powerful level of strength. Okay, anything else?
Debilitated but Vargotama Venus.
Debilitated but Vargotama Venus. Okay. You know, and of course, you know my opinion about that. It's not doubly debilitated now, but it's redeemed. It's redeemed. And now in this case, looking at additional measures of Venus's strength are going to be useful, right? As we shall see. All right, what else? Anything else strike you about this chart? In terms of
Yoga and Saraswati Yoga.
Okay, well, good. Saraswati Yoga. Very good. Saraswati Yoga, people should see that here. We've got Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury, either in angles or the second. Jupiter's strength. Now, this is an important thing to see. What would you think about Jupiter's strength here? What's its dignity in the birth chart? Just its dignity.
In a sign of a good friend.
Well, I think we'd say great friend even.
A great friend. If not good, but great friend.
I'm just kidding you. I'm just kidding you. You might be a good friend too, but you know, in this case, it's also a great friend, right? So that's a decent dignity. That's a decent dignity for Jupiter, not exceptional, right? So
Jupiter forms the Gajkeshri Yoga with Jupiter and Moon.
And then you call it the Gajkeshri Yoga, right? And what makes this a real deal Gajkeshri Yoga, or otherwise?
Both of them are in angles. There isn't any other benefic aspect, and Saturn sort of spoils the party a little bit.
Well, Saturn definitely spoils the party, but there's not an additional natural benefic with Jupiter?
There is, yeah. Mercury is a natural benefic, yes.
And so it's combination. I mean, it's the same. Jupiter's forming both Saraswati Yoga and it's forming Gajkeshri Yoga, right? But everything here is under the strong iron fist of Saturn. That's true. Okay. And any other noteworthy things people want to mention about this chart? Well, what else about
planetary war?
Oh, go ahead, Roberto. Go ahead.
I was going to say the planetary war between Jupiter and Mercury.
Right. And this is why you've probably seen this chart before and why I've commented about it before. Because, well, first of all, which dasha was this person born in?
Mars.
Born in
The Nishta.
the Nishta, about approximately how much balance of dasha at birth?
At the end, but I'm not sure. Towards the end, but it finishes at 20 in Aquarius, I think.
Well, it's about halfway through it, a little more than halfway through. Okay. So he runs after that, right? What comes after that? After Mars?
Rahu.
18 years of Rahu. So it means he's going to enter his Jupiter Mahadasha, you know, in his early 20s, early to mid 20s, right? So when thinking about the kind of results that Jupiter can give here, now we saw with Saraswati Yoga, we saw with Gajkeshri Yoga, but is it involved in any other yogas of note?
So Raja Yoga by placement, fifth lord and the fourth.
Fifth lord and the fourth, Raja Yoga by placement. Is there anything that adds to that?
Associated with the Lugna Lord, who's Vargotama.
Yep.
A Vargotama Lagna Lord forming a 1-5 Raja Yoga falling at an angle. Right? And then any other kind of yogas that these planets might form?
Dana Yoga with Mercury and Jupiter.
Yes.
So Mercury has a special money-giving significance here as the Lord of 2 and 11. It's with the fifth, another Lakshmi Sthana, and with the first, a Lakshmi Sthana. So it's both, think about it, it's Raja Yoga, it's Dana Yoga, it's Gajkeshri Yoga, and it's Saraswati Yoga. And so what kind of results Jupiter is going to give is should be of interest to any Jyotishi, because we saw it was involved in a planetary war, but what else is going on with it that would be a potential blemish here, maybe even produce a bungle?
Combustion.
Combust. Yeah.
It's pretty combust, right? Now, would it be becoming more combust or less combust?
Less combust.
And this is important to see. This is important to see. It's within 4 degrees of the sun, but it's been totally combust and it's moving away from that, right? Moving away from that. So the question really becomes, what kind of strength does Jupiter have here that can, and therefore what kind of level of results that it's going to give, and particularly given its planetary war condition and in some level of combustion, is there compensatory strength? Right? So we saw that it was a great friend in the birth chart. What do we see about in the Navamsha here?
It's in the sign of an exchange.
It is? Well, I mean, here go. Well, I thought you
Yeah,
said
the Mercury-Venus exchange, so it's in that sign involved in that.
So I misunderstood what you were saying at first, Roberto. It's with a planet who's involved in an exchange.
Yes, that's right.
Which I've indicated that, in my opinion, my experience, that seems to, help a planet in terms of its strength. So that's something to make note of here. But the reason I'm showing you this example, and the reason I'm talking about this, is this becomes a situation where you really want to look at what's happening with Jupiter beyond Rashi and Navamsha, right? Beyond Rashi, meaning in the Vimshapaka Bhava and then also in the Shad Bhava. Well, I'll bring up this schematic here, which shows you the Dasa Varga, meaning the 10 divisional scheme, and it shows you what is Jupiter's placement in each of those 10 Vargas and what its dignity is, right? And, what strikes you about that of any significance?
It's looking pretty good overall.
Notice in particular the own sign placement in the Drekana, right? The Navamsha's dignity doesn't look particularly noteworthy, but we saw that it's with a planet that's involved in an exchange. Right? And, you have your own sign in the Trim Shamsha and great friend in the Dashamsha. So, yes, it should be looking pretty good, and this gives it to you in graphical form, right? Now, when you see the Vimshapaka in graphical form, all 4 combinations of division, what strikes you about this chart in general?
Everything is either above baseline or close to baseline, mostly above.
Right, and you have a number of planets that are becoming significantly strong by falling in a number of good divisions, and we're highlighting the combination of Dasa Varga, 10 divisions and 16 in particular, right? In which case, Jupiter looks quite healthy, is it not? So someone tell everyone else, if they don't already know, whose chart we're looking at here. People don't know? Anyone know? No? I'm actually kind of surprised. This is the chart of Woody Allen, folks. This is the chart of Woody Allen. And, we saw that, by inspection, you can see strength of certain grahas in the birth chart, but then this sort of adds a particular dimension to it. Particularly when you think about the planets that are involved in the Saraswati Yoga, for example. In the Dasa Varga scheme, Vimshapaka Bala, all of those planets are 14. Anything, starts to get 14 or above, it's pretty significant. But really, all the planets in Dasa Varga, for the most part, have at least decent strength or started moving towards being quite strong. And of course, Saturn takes the cake here. which is not surprising based on just what we saw by inspection. And then if you look at Shadbala, now you see what strikes you about Shadbala here in particular about Samgraha.
Saturn's particularly strong.
Saturn's like off the charts, right? I mean, you won't see that many grahas that achieve such a particular Shadbala score. And what I asked you to do in the articles is kind of look in the table above and see some of what is really contributing to that. And you can see here that it's good dignities and placements and good divisions in Saptavarga, the group of 7, is strongly contributed to that. Kendrati Bala, where planets and angles get a full rupa, right, which is what's going on here. And then it's getting directional strength as well, right? You see the Dik Bala that's given here, and so on and so forth. So, you knew Saturn was strong to begin with, just by basic principles of looking at Rashi and Navamsha, but really how strong it is, it kind of goes to a next level when you see, and of course, his Saturn period, which I think he entered when he was like in his late 30s or whatever, was extraordinary for him, in terms of success and status within the film industry. But then, in the article, what I was also emphasizing is that there are, certain things that these measures don't account for that, interpretive principles that I've given you, and hopefully you've seen to be very valid. And, what do we note about the 2 periods that, really gave him his great fame and success were, of course, Jupiter and Saturn. What do we notice about them?
They're in mutual sambandha. They form a Raja Yoga. Both of them have sources of strength.
Which
and they also...
What's Jupiter's source of strength here?
It's Vargottama, and it has directional strength.
2 sources of strength here. Vargottama and directional strength, and is again in the sign of a great friend, just in terms of the dignity. And what about Saturn?
Saturn has directional strength here.
What else?
It's an exchange.
Yes, in Parivartana Yoga.
Those are the sign one, right? So these are actual things. I mean, you wouldn't really even need to see this based on what everything you'd seen previously about assessing the kind of strength that Jupiter and Saturn can give in their periods. But this then really adds yet another dimension. And it's, this is not an ordinary situation. This is truly an exceptional situation, which is why, it produced these very dramatic and truly exceptional results.
Jupiter here is also the focal point of Abhera Yoga, isn't it?
It certainly is. Now, the reason that all this about this Jupiter interested me, because go back to the fact that it's involved in a planetary war and it's got some level of combustion. If you just interpret it on that basis, right? And, he wasn't this major movie star and so on and so forth, but, he did have a great level of success. But Jupiter has a lot of things that compensates for it here that indicates it is going to give the results of the yogas that's involved in it. It did give Saraswati Yoga at a good level. It did give Gadkeshwari Yoga at a good level. It did give Raja Yoga at a good level. And it did give Dan Yoga at a good level. Under different situations, that planetary war and that combustion would mitigate against that indication. And this is why I'm emphasizing that, it's never a single factor determination. It's always a blending, a synthesis of a number of factors. Questions then about this example? All right. You're either totally following or you're all stunned. Probably the first. All right. So now look at this chart. And again, yogas planets in some sort of condition you might consider notable? Anything at all about this?
The exchange between Venus and Mercury.
So you have an exchange between Venus and Mercury here, obviously creating strength, a source of strength for both planets. What else?
Another between Mars and Saturn as lords of the 2nd and 11th.
So 2 exchanges here. Now remember that neither Vimshapakabala or Shadbala, at least that I can determine, is going to note this as being sources of strength. Now it's going to note that what would be Venus's dignity here?
Sign of a great friend.
Sign of a great friend. And what would Saturn's dignity be here? Are they natural? What is Saturn to Mars? You know, is Saturn a natural friend or a natural enemy?
Enemy.
A natural enemy. But then what's its temporal relationship?
Friend, so it becomes neutral.
So it becomes, its final dignity here in this chart is going to become, but then it's involved in this exchange, which, you know, is you've been hearing from me all along, how this changes the picture. It changes the picture. Now, what period was he born in? This is chart of man. What period were they born in?
Sun spirit.
So
Just the very end of Venus.
Critical. 2621, so critical started.
Well, it would be 1320 to 2640 would be
40.
right. But
So
right on the edge. You're right. Yeah. Just, you know, very, very end of Venus. So it's going to be followed by what? Sun, right? 6 degrees. He's about maybe 7 years old, followed by Moon. Okay. So 10 years. He's now starting to get into his later teens, and he runs Mars for how many years?
The next 7.
Yep.
Right. Okay. So later teens, early 20s. Now, the Yogacaraka Venus, 10th Lord in the 6th house with strength. What could that mean?
Competitiveness.
Yes, it could.
Defeating enemies.
It could, Katrina. Very good. And then, so now come back to this Mars. This is the period that he's running, right? And so is it involved in any yogas of the first lagna?
Dawn yoga.
Dawn yoga. Okay. Dawn yoga, because it's an exchange between the 11th Lord and the 2nd Lord, also, of course, the 1st Lord. Is there any other thing in his chart that suggests Dawn yoga? What about just Saturn itself?
As Lugna Lord in the 11th,
Yep,
it forms a Tanya Yoga by placement, and then the mutual aspect with Mercury as 9th Lord contributes, and it's another Tanya Yoga.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. You're seeing it very well. And then, you know, any other, well, okay. So now you've all read The Kaleidoscope of Time, and you may remember what that article is about. I think it was subtitled The Importance of, anybody remember the importance of Kaleidoscope of Time, the importance of?
Dasha Lagna.
Dasha Lugna.
Dasha Lagna, right? What do you like about Dasha Lagna here, if anything?
$110 exchange.
Now the exchange becomes 110. Right? And what about these combinations with Saturn going to the 10th? What else kind of goes on then? Mercury becomes which lord?
5th Lord. So it's a 1-5 Raja Yoga.
Right. So, you know, pretty powerful combinations. And whose nakshatra is Mars in?
Rahu's.
Rahu's nakshatra. What kind of yogas is Rahu giving? We're back to the same thing, folks.
Sure, Don Yoga's project.
Done yogas from the Lagna, birth Lagna, and from a dynamic point of view, from Dasha Lagna, the real Raja yogas. So now you could see all this just on the basis of the Rashi, and on that basis you could make certain predictions about, career, rise up in success and in gains during this period just based on this. And you'd be correct. But then if you really wanted to investigate the magnitude that this Mars period could give, you want to investigate more deeply, right? What would be the first thing you'd want to look at?
The Navamsha.
The Navamsha. And what do you note here?
Mutual exchange.
Aha. Something that neither Vimshapaka Bala or Shadbala would take into account. Right? In fact, they would call Mars's dignity here, it would say it's in a neutral. Right? Because it's a natural friend with Jupiter, but Jupiter's more than 4 signs away. It's an exchange, and in my view, now it gives its results as if it's in its own sign in much. And so now the picture, gets added to, doesn't it? We start to really think about this Mars. Maybe it's going to give really, really powerful results. What might we look at next?
The quantitative analysis, Vimshapaka Bala, Shadbala.
The quantitative analysis. Well, let's look at Vimshapaka first, right? And it's not that extraordinary. I'm sorry. I mean, it's exceptional in the sense that it's 15 and 14 and no, it's 15 and 14 in the ones involved groups of 10, group of 16. Okay? But it's not off the charts. But it's it's really starting to get the Vimshapaka Bala. As I said, anything 14 above. Okay? So certainly gets support from that standpoint. But now look at it in the Shadbala.
Oh yeah, very strong.
Look at Mars's, look at Saturn's. You see? This puts a different perspective on the picture, doesn't it? Does anybody have any idea who this chart is? It's the chart of Bjorn Borg. Bjorn Borg. Everybody recognize Bjorn Borg, very famous Swedish tennis player, who in his Mars period at a very young age, came to the #1 ranking among men and was nearly unbeatable during his Mars period. And of course, he, had this very high status in the world of tennis, but then, of course, he was earning millions of dollars also as a result of that. And again, my point here in showing this chart is that just by inspection, just on the basis of Rashi and Navamsha, you could see strength of Mars and some level of strength of Saturn as well. Where does Saturn go in Navamsha? It goes in Leo, not really exceptional there. But when you consult the quantitative measures, it adds to the picture, particularly Shadbala. Both sort of add to the picture. And we see really truly how strong this Mars is. And now we know the magnitude of result it's going to give insofar as the yogas that's involved in. Right? Questions about that? Okay, we'll go on. Well, before we go on, I also want to show you Dashamsha. And you'll see another reason why the Mars period proved to be what it proved to be. Here it sits, because then I was saying in the article, then you look at a particular area of life with regards to that particular graha, see its strength relative to that division, and what kind of results it can give in that sphere of life. And here we have Mars as the first lord in the Lagna in its moon Trikona sign. I'm sure if Bjorn Borg, as a 14-year-old, would have come to all of you, he would have predicted his great fame and fortune in his Mars Mahadasha. Right?
Oh, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. So you are all, now you're no longer Jyotish Covids. Jyotish Covids are beginning students of Jyotish. You're Jyotish Visharads. You're all Jyotish Visharads, which means, so when you say a person is Jyotish Kovid, that means they know a little bit about Jyotish. And then when you call them a Jyotish Visharad, it means they know a little more about Jyotish. I'm just joking. Okay, so now look at this chart. All right. Well, look at this chart. Again, what strikes you? Anything with regards to yogas or conditions of planets that may be noteworthy or otherwise? Anything?
We have a Raja Yoga in the 10th, formed by Jupiter as the 5th lord and Saturn as the 7th lord.
Okay, so we have a Raja Yoga in the strongest angle. And anything help qualify that in a positive way?
I believe Saturn is in its own sign in the Navamsha.
Someone want to confirm that? Yes? Or no? It's in the second Navamsha, counting starts from Capricorn. Where does it go?
Its own sign. Yep.
In its Mula Trikona sign. So one thing, by inspection, we can see that, number one, there's this Raja Yoga. It falls in the strongest angle, and Saturn does have a source of strength. Is there any other thing that helps qualify this?
Aspect of Venus onto its own house, the 10th house.
Good. We have the aspect of the natural benefic Venus aspecting back onto its own 10th house. And, the gentleman highlighted Saturn-Jupiter forming Raja Yoga, but is that all here?
Venus Jupiter certainly does.
Venus-Jupiter as the 10th lord Venus.
And Venus has strength being Dikbala.
Well, now we're getting it. Now we're getting it. So a picture is starting to emerge with regards to this combination along the 410 axis of the birth chart.
And Jupiter's Gotama.
Jupiter is in exchange with Mercury in Navamsha. Jupiter must be in Virgo. Mercury should be in Pisces. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that gives you the first chocolate of the day, Ekaterina. That's a really good perception on your part, right? Because we already saw that Saturn has a source of strength, and now we're seeing that Jupiter has a source of strength that again would not show up in the quantitative measures. You'd not see that. And then Chuck saw that Venus also has a source of strength because it gives directional strength. And it's along the 410 axis, these Raja Yogas. A picture starting to emerge, right? Now, yogas show what, but then dashas show when this person was born in what dasha?
Jupiter's.
Jupiter's dasha, approximate balance of birth.
Not a lot left.
Approximately 12 years or so.
It starts at what degree? 20 degrees, right?
20 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're probably very correct. Good for you. So after age 12 or so, approximately, moves into what period?
Saturn's.
Saturn's. And now Mr. Yoga is going to take over here. Mhm. But now apply Dasha Lagna. Apply Dasha Lagna. What kind of planet does Saturn become?
Raja Yoga Karaka.
And now the mutual glance with Venus becomes what?
110 and 19 Raja Yoga.
Okay, all right. You see how this adds to the picture. So we have Raja Yoga from the birth Lagna. We have, even more significant Raja Yoga from Dasha Lagna. We have a planet that has strength, and it's involved in yogas with other planets that have strength. So again, just on the basis of Rashi and Navamsha, you'd make a good prediction. Keeping in time, Kal Deshpatra. He enters this period. It's 19 years. He enters it, in his early teens, maybe. So it runs in his later teens and young adulthood, maybe leading into his early 30s, something like that. Not a bad time. But then, if you wanted to investigate the ability of the Saturn to give its results strongly even more, what would you do next?
The quantitative indicators.
Right. So let's look at the Shad Bala here. Okay, Shad Bala, quite healthy. Right? We can see now, again, some of what produces that is a pretty good score in Sapta Varga. Part of that is the strong Navamsha placement. But again, it gets a full Rupa in Kendrari Bala because it has, it's falling in the strongest angle, the 10th angle, right? And so you've got the score. Now then, seeing it in the Vimshapaka Bala, 16, both in Dasavarga and Vimshapaka Bala. So now we have another dimension again, just like in the case of Woody Allen's Saturn, another dimension again. And so we predict not merely, a modest career rise or level of fame and notoriety, but a greater one. And what would add to that when we looked at the Shamsha?
Swachakra.
Swakshetra. Now, hazard a guess here. Now, I'm not sure about the accuracy of the Shamsha Lagna. Could back up into Scorpio, might. Let's see, what's the degree of the Lagna here? The degree of the Lagna is what? So 13, so it would have to, how many minutes would it have to back up to be, in the fourth Dashamsha, not the, fourth Dashamsha, not the fifth. How much time?
19.
19 minutes?
Right? 1320.
Well, it's a degree and a half past the point where it would have to go under to be in another Dashamsha. So that's
excuse me. I'm thinking Navamsha.
That's worth about 6 minutes of clock time. And it's just a consideration, but it doesn't obviate my point here, which sub-period might you predict that the initial fame and success came on? I'll give you a clue. It's the obvious one.
Saturn.
Saturn Ketu.
Well, I mean, that could be obvious from things that I've taught you, but it's even more obvious than that.
Saturn moon.
Saturn moon. Which it's interesting, this is the chart of Paul Simon, the very famous singer-songwriter, right? And, he started out as a part of this duo, Simon and Garfunkel. And what really put them on the map and gave them immediate sort of overnight success and led to great fame was a song that they wrote in 1964, written by Paul Simon, and that they sang called The Sounds of Silence. And it's a very melancholy sound. It's a very melancholy sound. What am I trying to say? Song. It's a very melancholy song. If you've ever listened to this, it was written in, everything is Moon Saturn period. But anyway, you can see how the Nishamsha, this principle, the idea of two planets strongly sambandha in a Nishamsha, when there's a promise in the birth chart, that period and sub-period can prove quite significant as far as, developments in a person's career life, favorable in this case. What adds to this combination in a good way? Anything add to this combination in a good way?
Jupiter's aspect.
Jupiter's aspect, right? Jupiter's aspect.
What's interesting, Mark, is that song was remade a couple of years ago by another band that has boosted its popularity and made it known to a bunch of younger people who I don't think knew it before that.
Known it. It's just old folks like me that would normally know about it, right? So I didn't know that. But yeah, it was from my generation. That was a signature song. And then there was that movie, The Graduate, that had all of Simon and Garfunkel's music in it, including this song. It became very famous for them. All right. So, questions about anything about this example? Okay, we're going to go on then. And so, I'm teaching a class now to some mostly beginners, but it's got some more advanced students in it, Jyotish Visharads, such as Chuck Crum. This is it's all about the grahas.
Who does his best to stay silent.
It's all about the grahas, and part of about the grahas that I'm teaching them is this idea of planetary strength and how that's determined, including these quantitative measures. And so the question naturally comes up when you look at these. It says, well, where's Rahu and Ketu in this? Right? Because it's not a part of Vimshapaka Bala. There's no Vimshapaka Bala for Rahu and Ketu, and there's no Vimshapaka Bala or no Shad Bala for Rahu and Ketu, right? So when we're trying to determine the kind of results, the strength of results that they're going to give, how do we operate, right? And so it's a good question, logical question, that of course did come up. And now I'm going to turn that question over to my esteemed panel of advanced students here. How would you respond to that question?
I would say the dispositor or the planet it's conjunct with, maybe most immediately.
That's it. It's not that complicated. It's it's whose results does Rahu give? And Rahu will give the results, as we know, of the planets it's most connected with. This would be conjunction or aspect. And then, of course, after that, dispositorship, both dispositorship by sign primarily, but then also by nakshatra. I'd be looking at that as well. So now see this chart. And again, which period was this person born in?
No, it's in Rohini, so moon.
Yeah.
Moon. Approximately how much balance of dasha at birth?
Maybe about 7 years or so.
You're good at this. We're going to rely on you for this going forward. You're going to always answer this question. All right. About 7 years. And now, after that?
7 years of Mars.
7 years of Mars. So it's going to put him approximately how old?
About 14 at that point.
About 14, right. And then he's going to move into who?
18 of Rahu.
18 of Rahu. Right. Okay. So becoming a young man, teenager, and then young adult, right? Mm-hmm. And so the kind of results that Rahu is going to give, first of all, just from the standpoint of what kind of results it gives, not how strongly it gives them. Just how would we think about the kind of results Rahu could give and why?
Its dispositor is in the first house. It's also aspected by Venus, which is in the second.
So if we're going to go by, well, first let's start with, I usually want to start with the results of, what's the planet that is connected to Rahu, not by dispositorship and or nakshatra dispositorship.
It's aspected by Venus and by Jupiter.
Right.
It's the aspect of both benefics.
Yes.
And what about Venus as being one of those benefics? Does that strike you at all?
It's a Raja Yoga Karaka.
It's Raja Yoga Karaka. Right? And then Jupiter is strong, and is it just, why is Jupiter strong?
Own sign.
Its own sign Vargotama.
Own sign Vargotama. Okay, own sign Vargotama. And so it gets the aspect of two benefics, one of whom has this really good source of strength, and one of whom is a very important planet for this Lagna being Yoga Karaka, right? And then which houses does Jupiter rule?
The 3rd and the 12th.
3rd and the 12th. Given the fact that he starts entering this period in his, he's moving into his teenage years, what might that make you think about in terms of an influence on Rahu?
As the 3rd Lord, perhaps involvement in sports.
Aha! That would be a very good deduction. A very accurate one in this case. So we see that gives results of Venus, Yoga Karaka. We see it gives results of Jupiter, a strong 3rd Lord. And now go to disposorship. Who else's results does it give? And what might that be noteworthy in any way?
The results of the Sun.
And so interpret the results of the Sun. Anyone?
Bodhidharma Yoga.
Yes. Buddhidharma Yoga.
Bodhidharma Yoga, because it's connected to the 1st house and Mercury's not combust. Right? Now, what other yoga? Any other yogas? Sorry. How would we think about the results that the Sun gives here?
Does it also form an Arishta Yoga by placement with Mercury there as a 6th Lord, the Sun there as the 8th Lord, and both of them being in the Lagna? A mild Arishta Yoga, and especially with Mars's aspect onto the Lagna, perhaps that contributes.
And with the 1st Lord in the 12th, yes, the body could take some punishment during this time.
Yes.
Which, for an athlete sometimes happens. And when I tell you who this is and what sport they played, you'll understand how that has expressed itself. Okay. So good for you for seeing that. But let's stay on the favorable side to begin with. What's the favorable side of the yogas that the Sun gives? Missing two.
It has a Shubha Ubhayacharya Yoga that's associated with, or just Ubhayacharya Yoga, really. Saturn's there in Ketu. But.
Yes. It's the Sun is the focal point in the 1st house of a Ubhayacharya Yoga that's involving no less than 6 grahas. Actually 7 when you include Mars. Okay? Because the Sun is with Mercury, it's surrounded on one side by Venus and Ketu, surrounded on the other side by Saturn and Jupiter, and gets the aspect of Mars. One other yoga that we're not seeing yet, that if you start taking my Laghu Parashari webinar, you highlight. You know this principle without taking my Laghu Parashari webinar. Think about the results that the Sun gives and why.
Is it because it's the 8th Lord, it's a neutral, so it takes on Mercury's?
You got it. You get the second chocolate, Roberto. So what's happening here? What kind of yoga does Mercury give? Besides
1-9.
Right. It's the 9th Lord in the 1st giving what?
Raja Yoga. Sorry. Yeah.
Giving Raja Yoga by placement, and the Sun being pure impressionable as the Lord of the 8th will give that result. Gives the results of Bodhidharma Yoga, gives the results of Upacharya Yoga, gives the results of Raja Yoga, and gives some level of result of Arishta Yoga. All of these. And Rahu's Nakshatra Lord?
Is it Ketu?
Anyone else?
Ketu.
Venus? Because
think
it's Purva Falguni?
It's a little short of Venus, I think.
Just by 2 minutes.
It would have to pass 1320, so it gives K2. And whose result does K2 give? It's with who?
Venus.
Venus again.
We're back to the Venus. Okay. Now apply what I've described as being my favorite thing to do. As we interpret the Rahu period, what would we now also do when we consider the results that Rahu could give?
Dashalagna?
Dashalagna, yeah.
Now what emerges?
In 10th house, exalted moon. Oh, in sign it is exaltation.
And what about this moon? Do you notice any yogas it might be involved in?
Mukuta Yoga.
Aha, Rami.
Aha, yes.
The Mukuta Yoga.
Very good.
He wears the crown. Now it goes to the 10th. He wears the crown. What else from Rahu? Where does the Ubacharya Yoga, what's the focal point on it?
6th house of competition.
6th house, competition. Now think about the combination of Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter from Leo. How about just the Mars-Jupiter combination from Leo?
The lords of the 5th, the 9th, and the 4th. Beautiful Raja Yoga.
Some of the most brilliant Raja Yoga for Leo is the combination of Mars and Jupiter. Mars is the Yoga Karaka planet. Jupiter rules the 5th and the impressionable 8th. Now it's following along the wealth-giving 511 axes. Saturn adds its distinction here as a Kendra Lord, but also the 6th Lord. This is the chart of someone who is just referred to in the sporting world as the Great One. It's the chart of Wayne Gretzky, right? The very famous Canadian hockey player who became the Great One in his Rahu major period. You know, a lot of people would look at this chart, oh, Rahu in the 8th, you know, but you have to see how, it's results. But now, strength of results. Strength of results, and this is one reason I'm showing you this example. We saw that, how we judge Rahu's strength by Venus's strength, by Jupiter's strength, and by the sun's strength, right? Well, what do you notice about, we already saw that Jupiter is in Swakshetra Vargotama. What do you notice about the sun here?
Exalted.
Exalted, right? In the Vamsha. Now the reverse is true. I've shown you what could add to the picture here. You'll see that from the Vimshapaka point of view, the sun is quite unremarkable. Venus, however, which again, is another result that Rahu is giving, is exceptional. Is exceptional. And the Shadbal of the sun, if you went by the Shadbal of the sun, you'd be completely misled. Right? Because you see it's right, but then again, Venus is quite healthy. Quite healthy. And then, now look at the degree of the Lagna here in his chart. Look at the degree of the Lagna. How much time would it change? How much time would it be to change the Dashamsha Lagna?
Less than a minute.
If you backed up the birth time to under 12 degrees, which wouldn't, take much time at all, maybe less than a minute, as you say. It's instead of being in the 5th Navamsha, it's going to be in the 4th Navamsha, right? It would back up. The Shamsha Lagna would back up one sign, is what I'm saying. Given what I just shared with you about what happened as Rahu period, what do you think is his Vishamsha Lagna?
Might be likely it's Sagittarius.
Yes. And his initial stardom and the beginning of his great career happened in Rahu Saturn. What would you understand about that, given some principle that we're doing?
10th away. If we switch it to Sagittarius.
Falls in the 10th from there. Falls in the 10th from there. Quite an interesting horoscope from that. Of course, actually after he ran Rahu, he ran Jupiter, and it's, more the same. Okay, so those are those charts. Now I want to, and Chuck, you've seen this movie before. I think you've seen it twice now before. So you can tell me how it is the third time, but other people haven't. So I want to show you this chart, which was the chart of the Indian girl, teenage Indian girl, that I gave in the Jyotish Journey challenge for this week, that some people have commented on. Do people recognize this chart, those who worked on it? Remember this? This is the chart of a 16-year-old Indian girl living in India. And I asked you to comment upon the potentials of the dasha sequence Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn. Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn. But before we do that, what is a very distinctive feature of this chart in terms of yoga?
Lagnati yoga.
There is Lagnati yoga. How would you qualify that Lagnati yoga?
We've got Venus exalted and also in exchange with Jupiter. So there's a parivartana between the 6th and the 8th.
What's really missing from this Lagnati yoga that doesn't make it much of a, I mean, really, maybe you don't know. What's missing here from this Lagnati yoga? Anyone?
Benefic in the 7th.
Benefic in the 7th aspecting onto the Lagna, right? Which, is an important thing, as you'll come to know here. Now, you said
two of the constituents are in Graha Yuddha as well.
Yes.
Right. Right. So, one's in exaltation sign, but, two of the constituents are in a planetary war, very close planetary war. But you mentioned the 6-8 exchange. Would you consider that to be a favorable exchange, unfavorable exchange? What?
I imagine it would have its unfavorable aspect, although it would also form a Viparita Raja Yoga, wouldn't it?
Would it? Would it? That's a good question. Would it? Would it form that? The classical definition of Viparita Yoga. I'm not talking about the partial Viparita Yogas that are referred to in Paladipika.
So I'm inclined to think that because we've got Jupiter as a lord of the 6th in the 8th associated with the lord of the 12th and further afflicted by 2 natural malefics, that it should, although I have a feeling you're about to tell me that it doesn't.
In order for this to be Viparita Yoga, as in terms of that, you were in that its full definition, there can't be the involvement of any other lords except lords of.
Of course, yes.
That's just not the case here.
Yes.
But again, so in terms of a very significant signature yoga of this chart, what do we see? What haven't we mentioned yet? It's not a Graha yoga. It's a yoga based on house lordship.
Is it Ava Yoga with the Lagna Lord in the 6th house aspected by Mars?
It is. It's Ava Yoga, which, for those of you who don't know the term from Paladipika, basically it's the category of Arishta Yoga. And spell that one out, could you? What creates the Ava Yoga here?
So the Ava Yoga is created by the Lagna Lord occupying a Trik house here, the 6th, and there should also be the influence of natural malefics on either the Lagna Lord or the Lagna. Here we've got the aspect of Mars onto the Lagna Lord.
And then one more factor based on its absence?
There's no relief from natural benefics.
Right. And why is the aspect of Mars here, not just as a natural malefic, why is it particularly problematic that adds to the malignancy of the Arishta?
Is it because it's a double Maraga, ruler of the 2nd and the 7th?
That's it.
And also retrograde, so it's going to show its worst side, I suppose.
Absolutely. Aspect of retrograde malefics involved in Arishta yogas are worse. It's a double maraka. So now a certain picture is emerging, but see, that's just one part of it. I've emphasized, or it gets emphasized, that dispositorship is an important issue. It's qualifying any yoga, right? What disposits this yoga, both from a sign aspect and also from a nakshatra lord aspect?
Jupiter and Mercury.
In the 8th, in a planetary war, under the influence of natural malefics, particularly Saturn. Now, beginning students like to tell me things like, wow, Mark, that Saturn's a Yogacaraka planet. It forms the Raja Yoga, and so on and so on and so forth. And all that may be true, right? But I don't care if a planet's a Yogacaraka planet. A malefic is a malefic. And it's going to behave in terms of infliction to these planets, which it does. So not only do you have the Arishta Yoga here with Venus, the Lagna Lord, and they're also going to say, but it's exalted. Yes, exalted, right? But it's the Lagna Lord in the 6th, aspected by a retrograde Mars, malefic, who's also a double Maraka, and disposited by a planet that goes in the 8th in a planetary war with more malefics, and there's an exchange of 6 and 8 here. This is a very, very unhappy combination. Okay. And then this person runs Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn. What could have happened? Now, give you a clue here. Focus in on the sub-period Lord, Saturn. Lord of the 4th in the 8th with the 6th Lord.
An accident, car accident, or kind of accident.
Resulting in severe bodily injury. Now, people can have accidents all the time. There may be some damage to their car, but they don't get, personally affected. But with the combination the way it is here, where Jupiter disposits this primary Arishta Yoga, the tragic incident was that she was 15 at the time. This happened in October 2016. He was on her motor scooter, as so many young students are in India, and met with a traffic accident where she suffered severe head trauma and has been in a coma ever since October of 2016. She's in a coma, essentially unconscious. A very, very tragic sort of incident. Running the sequence of 3 planets, dashas of 3 planets in the 8th house. But that alone is not what it gives this. It's the primary Arishta and the activation of that then results in this. And then it's also, but why am I showing this in a lesson about Graha Bala? Does Jupiter have any source of strength here?
It's exchange.
In exchange. Somebody place its position in Navamsha.
Exalted.
It's exalted, right? So just on the basis of strength, just using those 2 factors by inspection, Rashi and Navamsha, Jupiter is quite strong. But strength is not influence. And so just because it's got a source of strength and just because it's exalted in Navamsha doesn't mean it can't in this condition and did in this condition. Jupiter's not a good planet for this Lagna at all, right? And look at its, the other factors around it. Anyway, I won't belabor the point. If you're just trying to judge the kind of results that Jupiter gives based on strength, it can give its results very strongly, but the kind of results it gives are not favorable at all. Right? Even from Dasha Lagna, it's the 8th Lord here with the 4th Lord. So you can see, retrospect is always easy to see, but this is my point in showing you this particular example. We have a planet. All the other examples, the planets were involved in these good and favorable yogas, and then they had these tremendous sources of strength. And so they gave the results of the yogas very, very strongly. In that case, favorable yogas. This is the reverse. This is the opposite kind of situation. And I'm not going to dwell on it anymore. But, this I wanted people to see this. Okay. So maybe just one or two more examples here. Chuck, I think this is probably another movie you've seen before. But folks, just take a look at this. This is this is another situation we want to evaluate. What strikes you about this chart? Notable features. Most notable feature. Any notable feature.
Lugna Lord conjunct the 5th Lord, but in the 12th house, but it's debilitated.
All right, so you have a Lagna Lord, goes to the 12th in its debilitation sign with a natural malefic. Okay.
Lagna is hemmed by Mars and Saturn.
But it gets, is it, would you call it Papakatara Yoga or not?
There are benefic in Jupiter in Kendra, benefic in Kendra, so it's not so strong.
Well,
Venus is also.
the fact that Venus is involved there, to my mind, does not make it Papakatara Yoga. And, this combination that, Purushottam highlighted does become something of an Arishta Yoga, but is there any Arishta Bhanga here?
The aspect of Jupiter onto the Lugna.
Right. Right.
And Mercury benefic in Kendra in 10th house.
Helps.
Yes.
Okay. Other distinguishing features of this chart?
Mercury Gandanta.
Yeah, Mercury's in a degree of Gandanta. There's no question. Anything else? Yogas. What does Parashara tell us is the best Raja Yoga for Libra? Anyone?
The 9-10 Raja Yoga here. Mercury and the Moon in mutual aspect.
Right. 9th Lord Mercury in the 10th. Raja Yoga by placement. And a mutual glance with the 10th Lord, where the moon's now aspecting onto its own 10th house. Do you see by inspection any source of strength for the moon?
It is almost full and it has Digbala.
Very bright and getting Dikbala. Powerful 10th Lord involved in the most powerful Raja Yoga, aspecting onto its own 10th house. Now, what adds to the picture of the kind of results this moon can give and why? What adds? Another yoga.
The Raja Yoga, it forms with Rahu. I mean, Rahu gives Raja Yoga because it's with moon. Or
Well,
no, it should be like, not trine.
You're on the right track though. Rahu's in a Kendra, and is there any influence of a trine Lord?
The aspect of Mercury.
Aspect of Mercury.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. But anything else that adds to the moon's ability to give great success and fame?
Rajkeshri Yoga.
Rajkeshri Yoga. Right? Jupiter's in the angle, not just from the moon, but from Lagna. Right? And what magnifies all this?
Jupiter is in Sagittarius in the Navamsha.
Jupiter has a good place. Well, Jupiter has a good placement. Has strength in Navamsha. Good. See the Dasha sequence. And what is he born? Before we do that, when there's a Gajikesari yoga for this Lagna, Libra Lagna, you've seen it many times in examples I've shown you, because which houses does Jupiter rule?
3rd and 6th.
3rd and 6th. And which house does the moon rule?
10th.
So if the Gajikesari yoga can make you a known individual, important person, with Libra Lagna, given those lordships, in what way, in what area of life, or in what distinction could that happen?
Sports, competition of some type.
Drama, performance.
That's it. Jupiter is in the sign of a malefic here. Moon is in the sign of malefic. Is it going to be more artistic, or is it likely to be more something else?
Something else.
Sport.
In this case, it's athletics. Now, look at the degree of the moon. Tell me in what period this person was born.
Mars. Moon is in Dhanishta.
Purushottam, what's the balance of dasha at birth?
I'm going to guess maybe about 5 years or so, perhaps.
We'll accept your guess. And after this?
18 of Rahu.
Takes him up to what age then?
23.
23. What results will, as an Indian man once asked me, what will the Rahu do? What will the Rahu do? Now tell me, what will the Rahu do?
The Rahu will give Raja Yoga.
The Rahu will make him hugely successful and famous. That's what the Rahu will do. What happens to that Saturn-Venus conjunction from Dasha Lagna?
It's a 110 Raja Yoga in the 9th house.
Yes, it is. Yes, it
And
is.
also 1-5.
What will the Rahu do? Now, strength of planets. Moon here, we saw that it had a source of strength, did we not? And what was that source of strength?
Directional and
Directional strength. All right, now we're going to look at it in our quantitative measures. How does the moon look here in the Shadbala?
Healthy.
Quite healthy. How does it look in the Dashamsha?
Exalted.
How does Rahu look?
Looks very good also.
Very well.
Why? Why?
With an benefic aspected by its lord, which is a benefic in an angle.
And what is the dignity of Rahu here? Can anyone tell me?
Oh, it's
According to Parashara
Mukachon.
Litragona.
Mulatikon. So, and see it in the, did I show you in the Vimshapakabal of the moon? Did I show you the Vimshapakabal of the moon? I don't have it here. You can see it in this table. Vimshapakabal of the moon is not that remarkable. But quite, we see the directional strength, and we see the Shadbala, and we see the strong placement in the Shamsha. So, and we see its condition here. This is the chart of the very famous tennis player Jimmy Connors, who became a dominant force in men's tennis in his Rahu period, and at times was the top-ranked player. In what sub-period within Rahu do you imagine that could have happened for the first time?
Rahu Moon.
Rahu Moon. Rahu Moon. Yoga show what, Dasha show when. So this is what I had to share with you today. Based on your reading of the article and the case studies that we discussed today, do you have any questions? So really the summary at the end of the article is what I would have you focus on. I showed you what I do, in terms of how, if I'm evaluating the person moving into a new Mahadasha, or I'm trying to evaluate the results that the yoga can give. my process is to inspect it in the birth chart and the Rashi for sources of strength, which is what we're doing here. But then, bring in these quantitative measures and use them, but don't go by them totally, because they will, not register such things as we talked about as exchanges and vargotamas and even things like directional strength and in the divisional charts, particularly things like the Mamsha. So this is, I think if you follow these guidelines, this is what has, helped me to be, somewhat successful in making accurate predictions about this. So this is the lesson on Graha Balas. Any questions about any of that then? Okay. Well, as some of you had just joined us late, this is the end of the Jyotish journey for the moment. It's not the end of the Jyotish journey, it's a temporary suspension. We've been through 2 12-month cycles. We've received 24 articles. And we'll go in suspension for the rest of the year as I focus on other things. But then in December, you'll see an announcement about the opportunity to renew a subscription if you choose to do so. And we'll start another 12-month cycle of the Jyotish journey, which, I have the opportunity to participate in. So unless there's anything else, until we meet again, I know some of you have registered for my Lagu Prashari webinar, so I know I'd be seeing you next week in that. Other than that, unless there's anything else, any other question, we'll just say our final prayer and bid each other adieu for now. Okay. Ohom masato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityor ma mritam gamaya, sarvesham swasti bhavatu, sarvesham shanti bhavatu, sarvesham punam bhavatu, sarvesham mangalam bhavatu, loka samasta sukhino bhavantu, om shanti, 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Folks, enjoy the rest of your Sunday until our karmic paths all cross again. Namaste.
Thanks, Mark.
Hey, guys.